Hello and welcome into this Thursday edition of Big Ten Today. So glad to have you here. I'm Kyla Mills alongside the former NFL coach Dave Wanstead, here to break down everything NFL draft because it is finally here. The wait is over. So many dreams are going to come true this weekend, which really is the special human part of all of this. What's that like to see those people that you know just get to experience that?
Well, it's exciting for the coaches because they get a chance to better their team. But these scouts, it's all about the scouts. I mean, this is like their Christmas. They have been studying and following these players for some of them 2, 3, 4 years. So this is a huge day for the personnel people, probably more so than the coaches.
So much work goes on behind the scenes that I feel like a lot of people don't know, and you're going to share a little bit more about that later in the show. But that is today's big story, the NFL draft coming up starting this evening with the first round. Last year, 55 Big Ten players heard their names called. A pretty big haul expected out of the conference again this season. Some of the headliners, including former Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy, Iowa star defensive back Cooper DeJean, and many more. And we're going to break all of that down right now on Big Ten Today. And for more on that, exactly on that, we welcome in NFL Films executive producer and draft analyst Greg Cosell. Great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. First, how are you? Have you gotten any sleep, or are you just full of caffeine at this point?
Sleep's overrated, Kylan. Sleep's way overrated. The Coach Wanstead probably remembers that from when he coached. Sleep's overrated.
Okay, fair enough. You can sleep over the summer, after the draft.
Right.
All right, well, let's start with the wide receiver class. I know there's been a lot of talk about the quarterbacks, but also just so much talent there. Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. with incredible numbers, really just good in a number of areas. But some people don't have him as the top, according to some reports from the scouts. Like, what's your rating at this point of where those wide receivers stack up, specifically Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Marvin Harrison. I watched him last summer from 2022. I watched him this year from 2023. I mean, to me, he's your prototypical number one receiver. You know, the way the league looks at receivers now, can a guy line up to the short side of the field, what we call the boundary X? Can he line up to the short side of the field? Can he win one-on-one? Because you're going to get a lot of one-on-one coverage to the short side of the field, and he can do that. He's got size, he's got speed, he's got hands, he's got body control. He's kind of got a deceptive explosiveness. He's so smooth and fluid that sometimes you lose sight of how explosive he really is. He's physical enough. You wouldn't say that's the number one trait that he has, but he's physical enough. I thought that he was the top receiver in the draft. Now, when I say that, there's other receivers that I think, like Malik Neighbors, is right there with him. But I just really like Marvin Harrison a lot.
That's where there's been some disparity. LSU's Malik Neighbors with that explosiveness, maybe overtaking Harrison Jr. I don't know, according to some eyes, depending on what you're looking for. But let's move on to the quarterbacks. Former USC quarterback Caleb Williams, maybe one of the only guarantees in this draft, going top overall to the Chicago Bears. As a Bears fan, I'm slightly invested in this. But what can folks expect with him going to the Chicago Bears?
I think that he's really gifted. The one thing that's not talked about with him, Kylan, which I think is really important, is he can control the football really well. And when I say that, I mean that he can place the ball where he wants to. And, you can do 10 things right, but if you can't throw it where you want to, you really don't have anything. And that's what he can do really, really well. I think there's so many other factors involved in his game with the movement aspect. Does he need to move? Does he not need to move? We can't get into his head. Obviously, USC did not have a good O-line. He probably felt that he had to put up 50 points every week. That's a hard way to play. But the fact is he really can control the football. I don't know him personally, so I can't speak to any of those other issues that are supposedly out there. But he's a pretty gifted guy.
Hey, Greg, this coach. The thing that jumped at me from a coach's perspective, in the last 2 years, 74 touchdowns and only 10 interceptions. I mean, that's 7-1. And someone said that he's always had one interception in the red zone total in his career. I mean, I think it's what you're alluding to there as far as him being able to place the ball, and he doesn't have a lot of interceptions.
No, and I think what stands out about that to me is he moves a lot. So there's a lot of plays that are outside of structure or above the X's and O's, is the term a lot of people use now. And when you're still able to throw with precision in that kind of environment, I think that's a real positive. But he does get sacked a lot. Some of that's obviously not on him, as we know, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out once he gets to the league.
After Williams, a little bit of conversation as to where the rest of this quarterback class will fall. Former Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy, possibly a top 5 pick here. Maybe doesn't have the video game numbers and that ground and pound offense that Michigan runs, but still brings a lot to the table. What stands out when you watch his film?
Yeah, Colin, I think he is your classic poster child for the projection aspect of the draft, particularly when it comes to quarterbacks, because I don't think his tape is first-round tape. And when I say that, I don't mean that he's no good and shouldn't be drafted. But I think when you look at his tape, and it has nothing to do with the number of times he throws the ball, those kinds of things don't mean much to me when I watch a player. One thing I learned, I was fortunate to know Bill Walsh well, and he always said, you isolate the traits of the quarterback. You evaluate the quarterback. And I don't think he had first-round traits. So that doesn't mean he won't get drafted there. And maybe in 3 years, we'll be talking about him as a great quarterback. But I think he's going to very much be a function of team and scheme fit, particularly early in his career.
Yeah, I think, I gave him credit, Greg. How about just the sense of, we know Jim Harbaugh is a quarterback guru. He's the whisper guy. He's the offensive coordinator behind the scenes, the head coach. And he misses 6 games. So you got a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, that really, sure, he had assistants around him, but his main voice was not there. I think that's huge for him to be able to overcome that and sustain it through the year. I think the maturity of this kid, I think, is special.
Yeah, and some would argue, by the way, Coach, and you look, you can go back to when you were in Dallas with Troy. It's actually harder to throw the ball fewer times, believe it or not, than it is to throw it a lot. Because when you throw it a lot, you get into a rhythm. When you're not asked to throw it a lot, you really never get into a rhythm. And then when you do have to make a tough throw, that's harder to do because you're, like I said, you're just not in the timing and rhythm of your game. So some would argue that it's harder to play that way than easier.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Greg, is how much of a factor is the performance at the collegiate level? You look at J.J. McCarthy's 27-1 record, the best among the top picks in this draft class. How much are scouts actually looking at that and playing that into their decision-making?
Kylan, that would be individual based. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot to me. I'm not. Coach Wannstedt might have a different view. I'm not a big believer in the idea he's a winner, so that means he's going to be a great NFL quarterback. I mean, I go back, a number of years when Alabama won the national championship and Jake Coker was the quarterback, and no one said he's a winner and should be a high draft choice. So I think you have to be careful about that. I think you have to evaluate the quarterback. He played on a really good team. They had the best O-line in college football, a dominant run game, a great defense with 8 or 9 guys at the combine. This is no knock on J.J. McCarthy by any means, but I don't think that factors into your evaluation of him, in my view, anyway.
Okay, how about former Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., a plus arm, led his team to the national championship game. What are you looking for when you watch him?
He's a fascinating guy to watch, Kylan, because he played in an offense where they pushed the ball down the field. He was the best intermediate and vertical thrower of this top sort of 6 group of quarterbacks, and that was the nature of their offense. A lot of intermediate vertical routes. He pushed it down the field, good accuracy down the field, big arm, made a lot of outstanding throws. And the thing that's fascinating about him, given the fact that he had a lot of deeper drops, is the fact that he didn't get sacked much at all. So when you add in the fact that he had to take deeper drops, throw it down the field, and hardly ever get sacked, that says that he's seeing things pretty clearly because the ball's coming out of his hand.
Penix Jr. does have a history of some injuries, though. Another thing you have to factor in, tore his ACL twice, has had some shoulder issues. How big of a concern is that at this point?
That'll be a concern for some teams, no question. He's been clean the last couple of years. He's played every game. It hasn't been a factor. As I said, he hasn't gotten sacked a lot in college, if you view that as an important thing. But I'm sure some teams will view that as a potential issue. But fortunately, he's been clean. I've gotten a chance to talk to Penix. He's a really sharp kid, too.
All right, well, it's a big piece also to add those linemen who are going to protect your quarterback. And Penn State offensive lineman Olu Fashanu projected possibly top 10 Big Ten offensive lineman of the year, consensus All-American at the left tackle position. How do you see his game translating into the professional level?
He's a strong player, Kyle, and I mean he's one of those guys that anchors really, really well. I think he's a better pass protector than he is a run blocker at this point in his career. And let's remember, none of these guys are finished products when they come into the league. They're still college players. My only concern with him, and we'll find out, is he's a little stiff in his lower half, and now he's going to face better pass rushers than he faced in college football. So we'll see how that plays out. But there's a lot of snaps where guys tried to speed to power with him, and he just stopped them dead in their tracks. He's a strong pass protector.
Hey, Greg, I will take the next guy here because this is kind of intriguing to me. Johnny Newton, defensive lineman out of Illinois, right? Everybody out there is talking about Byron Murphy from Texas, that he's the guy. But I'm a big production guy. And when I look at production, I'm a Johnny Newton guy. Maybe it's a scheme or just the school I come from.
Right.
What's your thought there comparing these? Because they're probably the two defensive tackles people were talking about.
Yeah, I think they're stylistically similar, Dave, too. I mean, they're three technique type guys. They're one gap guys, which is what you're used to. They're both one gap guys. Newton can certainly rush the quarterback. He's got great quickness off the ball. He can get into the gaps. He can penetrate. I'm really curious to see him because I think he was hurt a little bit this year, and I think it did affect his play, particularly in the run game. Because I watched him last summer from 2022, and I thought he was a really, really good prospect. And I don't think he played quite as well, but I know he had an injury this year. I even think he missed a game or two, if memory serves me correctly. But he's definitely that kind of player. He's kind of the smaller, stout, three technique that can rush the quarterback. There's a lot more of those guys. Obviously, I'm not going to compare him to Aaron Donald, but it's stylistically that kind of player. They're shorter, they're stouter, but they're incredibly quick off the ball.
Well, Newton led Power 5 defensive tackles and quarterback pressures for the second straight season in 2023. He is listed as just 6'1", though 300 pounds.
Yep.
Just curious how you would evaluate his size.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem, Kylan, anymore. We've seen that in the league. I mean, you can go back a number of years to someone like Geno Atkins, who played with the Cincinnati Bengals. We have guys like Grady Jarrett in the league now with the Atlanta Falcons. You can go back to the 90s and John Randall. I mean, there are smaller, shorter defensive tackles. They're gap players, and they attack in the gaps, and they're really good at it. They have tremendous quickness. So I think just like certain positions like wide receiver, even quarterback to a certain extent, I think the size is no longer a major part of the equation.
Yeah, next guy, Greg, I think the backbone of that Iowa defense, great Iowa defense this year, Cooper DeJean. He gets hurt, he comes back, he runs 4.4. I know we talked about him some on our 33rd team call once. My question is, do you see him? I know he's got the speed to play corner, and we watched all the tape together, but do you see, I kind of see him as a safety. I think a nickelback or a safety. Where are you at on Cooper? Where do you see him playing with all the guys you've watched?
Ultimately, I would say that I probably see him as a safety or a star, which is the nickel, kind of the Jalen Ramsey role that he played with the Rams. I think he can play corner depending on your scheme. I thought in press man, he struggled a bit because I thought he was a little tight hip coach when he had to turn and run. Now he's straight line fast. There's no question about that. But I thought just in terms of his lateral quickness, his change of direction, his transition, all those things we talk about at corner play, just a little stiff, but he's straight line fast. He's an explosive athlete. I personally think he'd be more of an impact player at the safety position.
This isn't the strongest safety class necessarily either. If a team is picking up DeJean for that, where could you see him going?
That's a great question, Kyle, because, there's another safety from the Big Ten who I really like, and that's Tyler Nubin. So, I guess it depends. DeJean has not played a ton of safety in college, so you're making a transition with him. And even though he's a really smart kid and a great athlete, there's still a transition. Whereas somebody like Tyler Nubin, who's a big kid, smart kid, great instincts on the back end, great understanding of routes and reading the quarterback, and he's got really good size as well. So that's a great question. And then it comes down to the team and how they evaluate the guys. But I really like Tyler Nubin as well.
Yeah, we're going to be talking more about Newman later on in our show. Moving along to the next player, Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze. Really good ball tracking abilities, but again, this wide receiver class just loaded. But what's his upside?
Yeah, he's a contort your body control, great hands receiver. He's got some smoothness to him, fluidity to him, but I wouldn't necessarily call him explosive in the way we think of Neighbors or Harrison. But look, in this league now, the ability to make contested catches, that cannot be overstated. That's a major part of how receivers make their money in this league, particularly one-on-one. You throw the ball up to them, and that's what you want, because quarterbacks are taught if it's one-on-one on the outside, throw the ball. So he's a master at that. He may be the best in this class at that particular trait. So again, he's probably a top 10 guy. I mean, Kylan, we're looking at maybe quarterbacks and wide receivers being 7 or 8 of the first picks in the draft.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, Greg, because you know who he reminds me of, and I hate to make comparisons. I was with Michael Irvin for his career at Miami and for Dallas. This guy reminds me of Michael Irvin. Just his size, the things you're talking about, body control, going for the ball, strong hands.
Yep.
No, I really like him. Let me jump on here. Laiatu Latu from UCLA. Most people, it's kind of unanimous that everybody says he could be the best pure pass rusher in this draft. We know the history when he was at Washington and he had the injury and he couldn't play and he goes to UCLA. Where do you think, you're talking to people all throughout the league, do you think that injury situation that he had at Washington is going to be a major factor in him being a high pick, or do you think they're going to ignore that?
That'll be case by case, team by team, Dave. I mean, my guess is there'll be some teams that don't even have him on their draft board, and there'll be other teams that'll love him, but hope that maybe he drops and we can pick him up a little later. But I think if you're just talking about his on-field play, and he's another guy that I watched last summer from 2022, and of course from this year, I think in terms of refinement as a pass rusher, he's the best guy in this draft. He's got more tools in his toolbox than any of these other pass rushers, and you rarely see that from college pass rushers. Normally, you have to teach them a pass rush arsenal when they get to the league, how to use their hands, how to have a plan. I think he's that guy right now. He actually reminded me of T.J. Watt when Watt came out of Wisconsin. I don't want people to think I'm talking about Watt right now when he's maybe the second or third or top pass rusher in the league. But I remember doing T.J. Watt coming out of Wisconsin. Latu kind of reminds me of him. I think he's a really, really good prospect.
Hey, Greg, a thought came to mind when you said he's got a lot in his toolbox. When we were at Dallas, Jimmy Johnson used to say, let's draft these guys that do things that we don't have to coach. That's what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Well, coach, there's some things you can coach and there's some things you can't coach. And I think when a guy has a feel for something, that's why the word instinct's often overused, but we all kind of know what it means. And when a guy has that to his game, kind of that innate feel for his position, you can't really coach that.
Speaking of a feel for a position, Greg, you clearly have a feel for all of these draft picks. My goodness, you said you've been watching 130 players on film. Exactly. Round of applause.
Give or take,
I mean, just insane. We appreciate you stopping by and making the time for us here on Big Ten Today.
Oh, thanks, guys. I loved it. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to Big Ten Today.
You love to see it. Bring your kid to work day here at the Big Ten Network being celebrated. Great job bringing us back into Big Ten Today by those young ones. Still tons of talent coming out of the Big Ten in the second round in the 2023 draft class. Looking back, former Penn State corner Joey Porter Jr. earned a starting role for the Steelers in Week 8, became a key figure on the team. He finished his first NFL regular season with 42 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 10 passes defended, and an interception. Then Iowa tight end Sam Laporta racked up 86 catches, 889 yards, and 10 touchdowns in his rookie year, setting a new league best mark for receptions by a rookie tight end. So it just goes to show, just because round one is over, the show isn't over, right? I mean, how important is it to, continue to evaluate and keep an eye on those guys who are outside of the big names, maybe that get the big hype?
Absolutely. I mean, you never know how other people are going to see a player, how they're going to view them. All of a sudden, the team makes a trade or gives away some picks, and somebody falls to you. So, I mean, we've drafted players in the last round that have been stars. So every draft pick is a guy that you got to assume is going to make a difference in your team.
All right, well, let's start with some guys who could maybe be, for example, Penn State edge Chop Robinson, maybe late first, maybe second. NFL Combine numbers really impressive. Elite speed, athleticism, fifth fastest 40 time. But I've seen some reports that he's a high-risk, high-reward guy. How would you assess that?
Yeah, I've watched Chop. I mean, the most important thing for a pass rusher is his first step. And by that, I mean, when the ball snapped, how quick are your reflexes to get moving? He is outstanding. He gives great effort. His numbers were good, just like you said, Johnny, at the Combine. The thing that bothers me a little bit is, his numbers at Penn State, 4 sacks. For a guy that's got that kind of speed and that kind of first step. Now, the question is, in Manny Diaz's scheme last year at Penn State, was his job just to stay outside and contain, or did he have the freedom to make some moves with his hands? I don't see a lot of that out of him. That's the only thing that bothers me. Is he a good enough athlete? We know he's got the speed, or is he a straight line player?
All right, how about Michigan DB Mike Sainristil? Big concern here is that he's 5'9", he's short. Is that going to be an issue and determine where he goes?
With some people, yeah, because some people will have that cutoff that they want a 5'11" or bigger corner, so
right.
It may hurt them. But I'll tell you what, this guy is a tough guy. You're not going to find, for his size, being a wide receiver and
I know,
moving
his first
the corner,
3 years,
right?
yeah.
I mean, think about that. I mean, usually those wide receivers, they don't want to hit anybody. He goes over there, and last year they used him in blitz stuff. I mean, he can run fast, so he's got all the intangibles. He'll be on an NFL team. There's no question about it.
How tough is that to transfer from being a
Real
wide
tough.
receiver to defense?
At a place
That's
at a place like Michigan with the #1 defense and the competition they have, that's a very difficult challenge.
How about Minnesota DB Tyler Newman? I know Greg just touched on him a little bit with what the safety class presents. There's not a lot of depth, not the most talented maybe. Where does he stack up?
Yeah, I love this kid. I was up there last summer and watched him practice, and Greg said it. He's 6'2", he's 210, he runs fast. He's a leader of that defense. I mean, this guy has played since his freshman year. When I see him, and they do a great job up there, P.J. Fleck at Minnesota, reminds me a little bit of Winfield, the safety that came out of there. He made the Pro Bowl this year for the Tampa Bay Bucks. This guy is going to be a starter in the league as a rookie.
How about Rutgers' Max Melton? How would you evaluate him?
Well, I always look at it this way. There's 2 programs that if you want to draft a defensive back, nobody gets them ready to play better. Alabama, when Saban was there, and Greg Schiano at Rutgers. And Melton, I love the guy. I mean, he's 4.3 speed. He's one of the faster corners coming out in the draft. He's well coached. He's physical enough to tackle. So, no, I think this guy is a keeper for sure.
All right. Former Michigan defensive tackle Chris Jenkins Jr. has the NFL lineage. Also a keeper, maybe one of the best at his position, I'd say. What's your take?
This guy, Jenkins, I love him. I mean, in the scheme that I would play, I would take him and put him over the guard. I think the question is going to be, is he capable of playing on the center as a nose guard, or is he going to be just a defensive tackle on the guard? I've never seen him as a nose guard do much, but as a defensive tackle, when you talk about Michigan having the top run defense in college football, it all started with Chris Jenkins.
Third-team Associated Press All-American, second-team All-Big Ten, coming off a really strong season. Moving along to Mike Hall, Ohio State's DT. Not to be confused with a different Mike Hall here at the Big Ten Network, but how would you rate his skill set? How would you rate both Mike Hall's skill sets, actually, while we're at it?
one's bigger and faster, and it's not the one that works with us.
Okay, all right.
But you know what? Mike Hall, I like him. He's 6'2", 280. He's only really played 2 years at Ohio State.
Right.
This is a player that I wish was coming back. I think he has a lot of potential to grow, to better his craft, as we say. And I just think he needs more reps. I think, 1.5 sacks this year on that defense, that's not much production. And again, I'm a big production guy. When I see that, I would like to see him come back, get another year at Ohio State. I wish he was doing that. I think it would help him.
What about the speed, athleticism, the explosiveness? Do you think that's there? Because that's the thing you can't teach.
Yes, it is there. He's a good enough athlete, and he's going to have to be, because at 6'2", the guys he's going to be competing with are going to be 6'4", 6'5". So his quickness and his athleticism is going to have to be the difference.
All right, one last one for you. Michigan linebacker Junior Colson. Where do you see him going?
Well, Junior, 95 tackles. I mean, this guy is a leader. If you watched him play all year, he gets guys lined up. They use him to blitz some. They're aggressive defense at Michigan. He makes a lot of plays, and he can make tackles sideline to sideline. He's going to make it, and he's so tough. Everything he does is toughest, and he's one of these guys who'll be a linebacker, but as a rookie, he'll be really good on special teams. He'll be on every special team.
All right, so that pretty much wraps up a lot of the defensive prospects coming out of the Big Ten, expected or projected to go in the second round. Now, as we step aside for a quick break, coming back, we're going to look at a couple of offensive weapons, including Michigan's key pieces and more players to keep an eye on this draft day. Today's Big Stat is brought to you by Walgreens. Ohio State leads the way with the most NFL draft picks among Big Ten schools since 2000, followed by Michigan and then Penn State. In the 2023 draft class, though, it was the Wolverines who had the most with 9. No surprise, 2 of the highest projected Big Ten picks this year, both out of Ohio State and Michigan once again. And we're going to keep the theme going and talk more Wolverines as we move on to the offensive side of the ball and take a look at some prospects who could also go in the second round. All right, let's start with Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson, another player who's not super big but has the athleticism. Only dropped 1 pass last season, Dave. Could he be a sleeper?
I absolutely, and I'll tell you what happened, Kylan. He, a little bit like Greg talked about with J.J. McCarthy, they didn't have the number of opportunities because Michigan's a run team.
Right.
But he made plays when he had to. He caught the ball when he had opportunities, and he went, ran 4.3. I mean, that is as fast as any receiver coming out this year in the draft. So he's got speed, he's got the character, the leadership, and he went to the Senior Bowl. And when you go to the Senior Bowl, I've coached that a couple of times. You're competing now with the best players around the country. And he had a great Senior Bowl. So people know he is not a secret. They know all about him.
All right, how about another player you were very high on? Washington wide receiver Jalen Polk, 1,100 plus yards, 9 touchdowns, has really shot up the draft boards recently. Why is that?
He has. I'll tell you why. People are making the comparison. He started at Texas Tech, transferred to Washington, and with Odunze and Wilson and the receivers they had at Washington, this guy still had 65 or 70 receptions. But they are comparing him to Deebo Samuels. And why Deebo Samuels, the player from the 49ers, is because this guy, they can put him at running back. He's as tough a receiver that's coming out in this draft. You can play him a lot of places, and he's going to get the ball in the end zone.
Okay, how about Maryland OT Delmar Glaze?
Yeah, big Delmar. I like Delmar. Delmar will get drafted. I think that he's going to be, at his size, he's so big, but he's kind of a road grader. I think that he'll end up at guard. I don't know if he's athletic enough to play out there at tackle and block those edge rushers. So I could see him get drafted and somebody move him to offensive guard.
Okay, interesting. Former Michigan running back Blake Corum, another player who's not necessarily big, holds a lot of records in terms of that program, though. Do you see his game translating to the NFL? You look like you're thinking about it.
There's one thing that he's going to have to prove to every NFL general manager, and he's going to get drafted. This guy's a great player. We all know that. I mean, he's strong. I mean, the guy had, I wrote it down here, would he have 30 reps on the bench at 225?
Oh, wow.
Offensive linemen do that. That's lineman numbers. So he's got power. He can make guys miss all the one thing that he's going to have to prove, that he can line up and the team blitzes a linebacker that's 250 pounds, and you got to be able to step up and block them and protect your quarterback. That's the only thing I'm talking to a lot of people that they want to see Blake do. If you'll step up in third down and block when somebody's blitzing, then he's going to have a great future. You got to do that, though, in the NFL.
Any evaluation of him blocking at Michigan?
Yeah, some. But, in Michigan, a lot of times in third down, remember, they would put Edwards in, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he would kind of be not the third down back because they both did it, but he was a bigger guy. And he was and I'm sure, I don't know this, but I'm sure that's what Jim was thinking, Harbaugh, when he put Edwards in third down a few times.
Okay, how about Ohio State tight end Cade Stover? Where do you see him going? I think he's another interesting one.
He's real interesting. I mean, where do you want to play him? I mean, this guy started I had to double check it this morning talking to our producer, Pavlos.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy started at linebacker in the Rose Bowl against Utah. And, you know, he's been a tight end. He's been a defensive end. He goes back a linebacker. You know, that's great. You can evaluate a guy and say, boy, he can do a lot of things. But if you're going to spend money in a high draft pick, you'd kind of like to see him do one thing really, really special. And he probably hasn't had enough opportunities. He'll make a team. Draft this guy. He will find a way to make your football team. I don't know if he'll go in the second round. It might be later. But he's a good football player. You'd love to have him on your team.
Then what kind of system, then, could you see him best fitting in with?
Probably a system. He's such a good athlete.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have to be a tight end that can move on the line of scrimmage and kind of be that combination tight end and fullback where they can block him off the line because he's such a good foot athlete.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. All right. Well, there's a look at some of the offensive selections who could go in the second round out of the Big Ten. Once again, NFL Draft Day here. Hard to believe. We're going to talk more about what goes on inside the war rooms coming on later in the show. But coming up next, we turn to the hottest team in Big Ten softball. Michigan head coach Bonnie Tholl joins the show to share her team's focus as they look to extend a 10-game win streak. Michigan softball on an absolute tear right now. The Wolverines have a 10-game win streak going, averaging more than 7 runs per game during that span, while also hitting 14 total home runs. Oh, by the way, this isn't Michigan's first 10-game win streak this season either. They did the same to close out the month of March. Just lots of positive momentum going right now in Ann Arbor. Here to talk more about that is Michigan head softball coach Bonnie Tholl joining the show now for today's big interview. Coach, first of all, thanks so much for stopping by. Appreciate the time. And how's it going?
Things are going well. I appreciate you having me. And there's classes just ended here in Ann Arbor, and students are approaching final exams. And we're playing some good softball. We have a couple of fun other things going on campus. And we are just enjoying what we love to do, our passion for Michigan and our passion for the game.
Well, it is very evident in the way your team is playing right now. Let's start with recent events. Friday night, first of all, it was a huge series sweep last weekend over Nebraska, but Friday night, a 9th inning walk-off. What was your message to the team going into those extra innings?
Well, previous in the game, in the innings, we had a few bases loaded situations that did not come through for us. But my message afterwards was that we're never, ever going to give up. And we have this Winston Churchill theme going on right now. And so we utilize a few of his quotes. And we did get runners on base. And so that was the key. And that was my message, right? We were getting people on base, and we were going to ride that momentum. And in whatever it took for us to score the runs, which was a solo home run, we were going to make it work for us. And so we took the positive out of that as opposed to looking at how many people we stranded on base. And we kept that momentum rolling through the weekend.
Your team has had quite the momentum. That was your third walk-off in 4 games. And another notable one just about a week prior against Iowa, sophomore utility Maddie Ramey broke an 8-8 deadlock with her first career home run. Just her 5th at-bat of the season, she goes up and delivers like that. What went into the decision to put her into that position, and why was she able to deliver in that moment?
Well, there were a lot of situational items that came into play there and substitutions. And at that point, we had to pinch run a few innings earlier for Ava Costales. We had put somebody in defensively for Ava at first base. And so it was time to Ava to come up to hit, but she was unavailable. We had exhausted her. And so Maddie Ramey was in that spot. She had only had 5 at-bats throughout the whole season at that point, but she's been swinging really well. And so we went with her. And, you know, I told the team afterwards in the locker room, you know, we coach, your coaches coach because one, we're competitive. We have a passion for the game. We're competitive, but mostly just to watch people have their moments. And this is what keeps coaches in the game, and watching Maddie Ramey have her moment. And it was a great moment for her and a great moment for Michigan.
Oh, man, it was just fun to watch from a distance. So I can only imagine being in that dugout, being in the locker room afterwards. Your team just playing so well right now. You've got a big series coming up against Penn State. What's the focus of this group?
Well, the focus is on the Michigan Wolverines, right? What we do in our circle. And what's most important for us is to remember our identity, what we do well, And we're going to keep rolling with what we do well and focus on that. Sometimes when you get distracted at standings or your opponent, it takes away from who you really are and your own identity. So we're going to draft off each other, because definitely everybody has a role to play, and everybody's picking it up. When their teammate's down, someone else picks it up. And so we're going to stick with that Michigan Wolverine identity. We're going to play the game right. We're going to play the game hard and bring the energy.
Well, along the lines of picking each other up, one of your players, senior Kaylee America Rodriguez, received the athletic department's Austin Hatch Adversity Award this week after dealing with cancer in 2022 and 2023. What's it been like watching her journey, and what type of inspiration has she provided your entire team?
Well, it's something that you would never wish on anybody or any team to go through. But the lessons that K-Rod, as we call her, has taught all of us is to persevere. In moments in life, they're going to be difficult. And I tell the team all the time, life is not like a calendar. You don't put things in a calendar and it go exactly as planned. And that's exactly how it went with Kaylee. She did not plan this. We did not plan this, but she was adaptable and she was resilient. And all those things that you ask your student athletes to be in moments of competition, she had to do it in life. And the perspective that Kaylee has is well beyond her 22 years on this earth. And that's what she brings to us. She brings that resilient piece. She's that inspiration for us when we think things are difficult on the field, when we can't get a bunt down, when we can't execute a pitch, we have Kaylee to look to give us that extra inspiration, to know that we can get through a lot of things that we see as difficult. We can be adaptable. And it's incredible to have Kaylee back in the dugout, to have her back in school and doing what college students do, loving their life from 18 to 22. And we're thrilled to have her.
Saw that she threw out the first pitch maybe a week or two ago. Man, that had me teary-eyed just watching the video. So just incredible resilience, and love to see her being back out there and around the team. Now, your team also has an effort going on to help raise money for the American Cancer Society, the 15th annual Michigan Softball Academy coming up next week. This is something that's been ongoing. Your team looking to be the first NCAA Division I softball team to raise $2 million for an outside organization. Can you tell us more about it?
Wow. So it's incredible. The people that have gotten involved over the past 15 years to make this thing go. And it started off as a small clinic for adults, for their opportunity to get on the field, to throw the ball around the field, to learn a little bit of some of the fundamentals that they see in our student athletes on a daily basis, to really interact with our student athletes. But it has grown so much bigger. We joined in the fight against breast cancer and really all cancers. And it helps to create research. It helps to create programming and funding for all of that for the American Cancer Society and making strides against breast cancer. And it is such a thrilling night. It is an energetic night. The stories our student athletes have going through a clinic and being the coaches and teaching people from age 21 to 80 on the field, running around bases and sliding and doing all the things they love to do. They're able to share it with the community and engage the community. And we are nearing the $2 million mark over 15 years. And when we first started this, we never would have thought it would have had the lifespan that it has. And it has made such a difference and such an impact. But here's the biggest thing. Not only does it impact those who are afflicted with the disease and their families, it makes such an impact on our own student athletes. And when you talk about the student athlete experience, our ability to host the Michigan Softball Academy and show our players that there's a time to pay it forward, and this is what we're doing. And I love the life skills that it teaches them.
Well, Coach, congratulations on all the success your program is having, not just on the field, but off the field. Truly, that's what college athletics are all about, teaching those life lessons. And it's clear you are doing an excellent job at that. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by. We look forward to watching your team as you approach the postseason.
All right. Thanks so much.
One last break to come here on Big Ten Today. Dave Wanstead is back with the inside scoop on what the war room is really like on draft day and how trades come to fruition. Much more insider information to come. Saturday, spring football excitement comes your way. See the Huskers in action live at noon Eastern. Then later, check out the Terps and Scarlet Knights. That's all coming up Saturday only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Now, only here on Big Ten Today, we're going to get the insider information from the former NFL coach on what really goes on behind the scenes in the war rooms. A lot of times there's chaos. Trades are being negotiated, phone calls are being made. You experienced that at Dallas. What can you tell us about what that was like?
Yeah, trades at Dallas. We made more trades that first 5 years than the whole NFL made combined in those 5 years. So we did a lot of it. The big thing is trying to find out, you got a phone in there with all 32 teams where you're going to speed count. And you want to find out who is willing to trade up or trade down. Not that you're going to do it, but you just want to know that if you get on that point where your players are taken who you really liked, now where am I going to go? The one thing you do when you draft a player, and this is kind of a funny story, Jerry Jones was in there, and he loved to talk to the players when we drafted. So if we drafted you, or before we turned a card in, okay, Jimmy would say, we're going to take Before
it was turned in?
Because we wanted to make sure you were okay, that you were healthy.
Yeah.
So we would call you and say, hey, Kylie, we're going to turn the card in. Are you okay? Where are you at? Who are you with?
Right.
Okay, we're turning the card in. Now you're drafted, or you announce it.
Yeah.
And Jerry.
Right, we see the recordings now of those calls.
Jerry would jump the gun sometimes. We'd say, okay, we're going to draft him. We're going to draft him. And he would hit the speed dial and say, hey, Tommy, how would you like to be a Dallas Cowboy? And then Jimmy would say, you'll give us what? A 2? He went, I just made a trade. And Jerry would say, well, I don't know if this Cowboy thing's good. I mean, it didn't happen very often, but it did happen. And then another one, you talk about trades. We're going to make a trade with the Detroit Lions. We had drafted Russell Maryland, 91. Russell Maryland first, Alvin Harper like 11th or 12th. And now we had the 20th pick of the draft. And Jimmy wanted to trade out. He says, let's get some future picks. So we're calling everybody. Who wants a trade? And Wayne Fonts was the head coach at Detroit. Wayne says, I'll make you a trade. They were picking way down, or we're going to trade out of the first round. We're going to give you our pick. You can move up, Wayne, and we'll take your pick and more. Okay, fine. So all of a sudden, we're on the clock, and here we go, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, and Jimmy's talking to Wayne, and Jimmy says, hey, Wayne, we're down to 5 minutes. Do we have a deal? And Wayne says, I got to talk to Mr. Ford, the owner.
Right.
And Jimmy says, you better talk to him now because I got the card in my hand.
Ticking, yeah.
And so now we're down to 2 minutes. This is unbelievable. And Wayne says, Jimmy, you have my word, okay? I can't find Mr. Ford, but I promise you. So Jimmy, that's how smart he says, who were you going to draft? And he said, Calvin Pritchard, a defensive lineman from Mississippi State. So Jimmy leans down and he says, Wayne, we're going to draft your guy as long as we have the deal that we're going to make a trade later and you're going to give us picks and the blah, blah, blah. So Wayne says, you got my word. Wayne, who knows? So we turn in Calvin Pritchard. So if you look at the 1991 draft of the Cowboys, we took Russell Maryland, Alvin Harper, and Calvin Pritchard in the first round, and then we ended up trading them. But you could have seen the Dallas fans, because at that time, we just took Russell. We took a defensive line with the first pick. Now you're going to take another one with the 20th? The Cowboy fans fell out of their chairs, and then obviously everything happened. So, I mean, it does get hectic, but that's about as close of a situation with a trade that I've been involved with, and I've been involved with a lot of them.
You pointed out that Jerry was maybe picking up the phones, but in general, across different organizations you were part of, how involved are the owners in making decisions? Are any of them breathing down your necks? Are they, forcing the hand one way or another? Or do they trust the process?
You've talked through everything pretty thorough to this point. Yeah. But there may be a player that you really like, but he might have an injury situation or a character situation. And that's usually when the owner gets involved, because they don't know enough about football and they're not watching the tape. But and I can tell you, an example. We were in there and we want to draft this player, and the owner said, you know what? If we're going to draft him, I'm just not comfortable with us standing at the podium because of what happened. The guy had some problems, some off-the-field problems. And so that's more what you get out of the owners. But when I was with the Bears, I will tell you this, the last pick that we had every year, if it was a 5th round, 8th round, whatever round, Ed McCaskey, Ed, Virginia's husband, God bless, rest his soul, Ed would always make the last pick. Now, he would come in and we would have our little bullpen, we called it, with 4 names on it. And we'd say, okay, Ed, this is our last pick. We're done after today. Who do you want? And Ed loved that. He always loved, let's take this. And he would come up with, I wanted to go to that college, but they wouldn't admit me. We're not drafting him, whatever. It would be. But Ed always loved doing that when I was at Chicago.
One quick philosophy question for you. You got to sum it up in like 10 seconds. But looking at the top 10 in this draft class, do you go with the best talent or do you go with the position?
Depends. If you're a young team trying to build, you go with best player. If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, your job's on the line, get a player right now that can help you win.
There you have it. Well said. All right, well, that will do it for this edition of Big Ten Today. For Dave, I'm Kylan. Thanks so much for stopping by. Be sure to stick around. More draft coverage coming up this evening on The Big Show, along with some baseball and softball as well. Have a great rest of your day.